Greetings, everyone. My name is Clayborn Benson. I'm the executive director here at Wisconsin Black Historic Society, and we're going to talk a little bit about Wisconsin's African American history, especially the earlier period, that enslavement period. So, if in terms of African Americans coming here, we're coming here early. 1820s, 1829, Henry Dodge brings his enslaved people here and settles in the western part of the state. Not much is happening in the Milwaukee, southeastern Wisconsin, but in the western part of the state, much is happening. Um, this becomes a territory in 1787. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, all of that is the Northwest Territory. And by law, it becomes a territory under certain rules. And one of the certain rules that must be mindful of is the um, no slavery in this territory in all of those states. And there turns out to be slavery in all of those states. Um, But in Wisconsin, which is the area that we're primarily talking about, it happens at Fort Crawford in the very beginning, and the commander of Fort Crawford is Jefferson Davis, or rather, the second in charge. He is the commander in charge of enforcing state laws, and so Jefferson Davis uh, allows his soldiers to bring their valleys and their servants onto the fort to make life a little more comfortable having to serve in the Wisconsin and the wooded area of Wisconsin. So Wisconsin's just beginning to see lights, and the Prairie du Chien, Fort Crawford is in the far south corner of the state in Prairie du Chien. And there is another fort, it's in Fort Brown in the Green Bay area. And so those are the two primary forts, and people and soldiers made their way from um, up the Wisconsin River, the Fox River, to each of the forts. But in the process, maintaining a, um, communications with each other and going to other parts of the state as they did certain things like surveys and all. And so we're going to move here. And this is a picture of Jefferson Davis. He is second in command at Fort Crawford in Prairie du Chien, and he is the one. But before I pass on, I want to say that although he makes the rules for Fort Crawford or Prairie du Chien area, he begins to allow other groups to bring in enslaved people, miners, uh, 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 the Indian trading post person, all sorts of people are bringing enslaved people in to help them. Trappers and guides, and they are horsemen that actually carries those furs from one location to those furs are quite heavy, and the trappers and guides are not wanting to do that manual labor. And in the lead mining area, the uh, the harvesting of the lead is hard and dirty work, and thus African Americans are given the task of doing that. And one of the earlier people is Henry Dodge. In 1827, 1829, he brings five enslaved people. He promises them that they'll get their freedom, and they eventually do. They get 40 acres, 60 acres, and 20 acres of land, and an ox in all three cases. These are all men. He has five people. Two of the women don't get any rewards of any sort, but the men do. And uh, uh, he promises it to them in 29. He doesn't deliver it to them until uh, 38, 1838, 11 years after. But uh, and some question his motivation. Some would even say that he's preparing to run for office, and he does. He runs for office, the territorial governor, first territorial governor. Then he becomes the first United States senator, and then becomes the second state governor in the state of Wisconsin. Henry Dodge is his name. Toby Dodge is one of the favorites of the African Americans. This is a territory, a picture of the territory, and this is the Mississippi River as it flows down that way, far to your left as you look at the screen, and the encircled area, the dark encircled area, is the slave mine, the mines in which there is lead in those mines, and people actually uh, are able to harvest lead. That lead is very heavy and it's used for all sorts of things, but it becomes very significant, important to Wisconsin's earliest growth. It's along the Mississippi on the western part of the state, and economic development really becomes very important in this state, built around these lead mines. The regional headquarters for all of this is in Galena, Illinois, just across the state of Illinois and Wisconsin's border. Um, Not very far, but in the Mississippi River is the way in which they actually. This is a picture of the lead. We're calling it black gold because it made a great deal of money for those early settlers in that area, and there were many who settled all in that area. As I said, the lead mining part of this was dirty, hard work and dangerous for many of the uh, enslaved people who actually did it. And there were some free people who did it. They made the bullets. Uh, I didn't mention to you that they harvest not just the lead from the lead mines, but they harvest what's called zinc. The zinc is intermixed with the powder, the gunpowder, and it gave it that explosive impact that that the bullet needed to fire, and that also harvests in that area. Um, this is a draft of Dred Scott. Dred Scott is has, along with his owner, made a decision to go up to the Minnesota area, and they stayed for a number of years. I believe that the statute limit is 3 years outside of your home state, and they stayed longer than that. I suspect it was as much as 5 years. His owner gets sick and comes down the Mississippi River, and on the way they stop in Prairie du Chien for stretch their legs and get refreshments and such. And abolitionists asked Dred Scott how long had he been away from his home state. They told him, he told them that it was longer than the indentured period, and and they drafted for him a petition to the courts to free Dred Scott because he had been outside of the his home state longer than the rules call for an enslaved person to be so. The state of Missouri did free him. The issue went back to the Supreme Court, and Chief Taney of the United States Supreme Court made a decision that indeed Dred Scott should be bounded back into slavery. That the decision that the court in Missouri made was based on laws and rules that had been in place, and others have used it. But Chief Taney felt that Africans were slaves. They weren't citizens, and they didn't. And the state or the government did not have to obey rules for slaves because they had no rights whatsoever. And that's one of the things that was listed in the United States Constitution, the three-fifths concept, and that was explained then. The three-fifths concept that African Americans are three-fifths of a man, as white people are one-fifth. I mean, one whole, and so that we had no rights and we were less than a full citizen of the United States. This is Mr. Jones, and Mr. Jones sues his owner. He's working a mine. He feels that he was brought up to a free territory, and he was uh, was an enslaved person, and he wasn't obligated to be enslaved. And the courts found him not guilty and actually freed him. This is a riverboat in which they used to haul the lead out that would take the lead to various parts of the country to make various objects, all the way from paint objects to lead and other things. But it had many uses, and that lead was taken out of the western part of the state by way of the Mississippi River. And I'd say to you that. This is a picture of one of the mines that actually they dug down into the earth to harvest the lead. Uh, but having said that, I wanted to say that after the Civil War is over and after freedom is given to enslaved people, there were African Americans who stayed on and mined those mines and made a great deal of money in those areas. And so that's one of the important things you must note that they continue to mining, and the mining era started again from the Civil War all the way to uh, the Vietnam War. The lead and zinc and other products were taken out of those areas. This is the indentured servitude contract that was given, and you're going to hear a little bit about that. But I wanted to share with you ahead of time. Uh, this is a contract that was shared with many of the enslaved people. Wisconsin's the law says there was to be no slavery in the state of Wisconsin, and so they still wanted the enslaved people, and so they, in exchange for food and meals, they created these contracts for 40 to 50 years. And this is that contract. And you're going to hear more about it in a minute. This is a young woman who came into the museum to talk about her slave ancestors, and they were enslaved in the western part of the state of Wisconsin. You hear about her in a second or two. We're doing our thing here. There we go. Thank you. Good. What's your name?
My name is Esteline Bell.
Okay, and so where are you from?
I was born and grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, on the north side. And for many years, I was interested in our family history and where we came from. So I started on a journey to try to locate on my father's side and my grandmother's side their people. Uh, my grandmother was Catherine Triplet, and so that kind of started my journey. And I started following it, looking for the Triplet family, and first found them in a book, actually. I was rifling through the books of the West, and they talked about this son, Henry Triplet, who was a blacksmith and was sold, or not sold, but sent to go to school with this one family. The mother kind of turned over her son um, on the condition that they give them a trade or provide him with a trade as a blacksmith, and then set him free. And he was born in Wisconsin in Prairie
Fishing.
du Chien
Mm-hmm.
in the 1830s.
Mm-hmm.
He was my great 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 grandfather. His mother's name was Patsy. That's who they referred to her as in the early census. She was one of the only black women um, in Prairie du Chien, and she was born in either Virginia or Kentucky in 1899. Right? 1799,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
1800. And she was bought by an Indian agent named Joseph M. Street. And, and it's not real clear if he bought her or if it was, he married this woman named Posey. Her maiden name was Posey, and they left Kentucky and moved to Illinois. And in Illinois, in 1817, 1818, slavery was abolished. And so she signed a 50-year indenture agreement with the Street family, um, saying that they would provide for her and all these kinds of things, but for 50 years. And from there, they lived there in Illinois for so many years. And then around 1829 or so, moved to Wisconsin, where he became the Indian agent. Joseph M. Street became the Indian agent there. And she had four sons, Henry, well, London triplet, uh, Henry, Louis, and Isaac triplet. And there's not very much to know. I haven't been able to find out a lot about her husband, who was James Triplet, and that's how they got the triplet name. Um, but they lived there for many years, and they were raised in the home with the Street family, and lived there for many years until probably, uh, I think, 1840 or something. And then they moved to Iowa.
And so, she was a domestic worker with the triplet family.
She was a
Street
she no,
family.
she was a triplet. She
She
lived with the Street
street family.
family.
Is she a
She
domestic worker with the
Yeah,
street
well,
family?
if that's what you want
Yeah,
to call
domestic
it,
worker.
yeah,
Right. Okay.
domestic worker.
Mm-hmm.
She cooked, and
Mm-hmm.
I've even found a couple of letters where some of the kids were writing home. The Street family, the white children, were writing home and asking about how's Patsy doing, and they had
Mm-hmm.
just moved
Mm-hmm.
into a house that had a kitchen or some stove, and they said that Patsy was a little upset lately because um, we expect for her kids to do work just as our kids do, and she didn't think that they should do those kinds of things. But they did learn how to read,
Mm-hmm.
and they were taught their religion along with the other kids.
Uh, move to the next one then. Good. How do I move to the next one? So, so I wanted to say that she just walked in and she shared with us her family history, and I recorded that. But that shows you that all of us have descendants from the past as we make our way through life. We all have ancestors and spirits of folks as we're having some. Look, there we go. And so this is a picture of Henry Triplet, and he and she is a descendant of Henry Triplet, and that is her descendant, and he did exist, and thus um, um, that she that is a person, and the people in uh, the area research center in Platteville also know of the Street family and the Triplet family. Um, so we're blessed that she stopped in. We want to thank her for her comment. But this again shows you that all of us have roots and all of us um, have played a role in existence. Um, I mentioned earlier that after the Civil War is over, after 1865, that African Americans continued harvesting the lead from the western part of the state. Uh, uh, and they made a great deal of money in the western part of the state. They took advantage of what their previous slave owners were doing and made money themselves. African Americans are coming to the state of Wisconsin. They're hearing about the great opportunities that the western part of the state has, the Grinds, the Shepherds, the Greens. They're coming and they're writing letters to their fellow uh, brothers and sisters and cousins and friends from where they come. Virginia, North Carolina. North Carolina is a really popular earlier state. And they themselves come. Smaller number in the beginning, but by the turn of the century, there are large numbers of African Americans settling in the state of Wisconsin. And they really say and they make it to themselves that they are an integrated community, and they get along with everyone. There's no such thing as black or white. And again, folks coexist. This is Mrs. Thomas Grimes, and they come from uh, again North Carolina, Georgia, and they get their freedom. They ask for money to get their freedom, and they come and settle in the western part of the state. Here are the actual letters used, and goes on. They settle in these areas, and so and many of them are become educated. Many of them become profitable, um, uh, and they dress well. They become excellent farmers, and they get along with the folks in that area. Now, the caption on this picture says the first integrated school systems. I wonder about that, but I would say to you that they held education is such a high esteem honor, that they wanted to ensure that every one of their members got a good education, and even some of the white citizens in that area was asking to come to that school because they really did a good job of educating people, and writing portraits, writing books, um, serving in the United States Army, all of the things in which this community really strived for and exceeded. They were held at, some of the members were quite well received and loved in that area simply because they were people of great respect. Um, and that's their one room school. This is Sarah Green. Sarah Green is from that area and she becomes a teacher in Milwaukee. I don't know if it's a public school but she comes to Milwaukee. But so do many of the other citizens decide to leave the western part of the state and go to Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, and other cities as they are looking for mates for marriage, and going to college and deciding that they want to try something different. This is the Arms family, and the Arms family is in the Cheyenne Valley area, and um, they are they too are integrated systems. And now the Shivers family is part of this grouping of folks. There's about 100 of them, and Shivers builds 19 round bonds. Now he don't actually build them himself. He just convinces his fellow comrades, many of them are white Bohemians, to that they want to build 19 round bonds in the Hillsborough, or as they affectionately call it, the Cheyenne Valley area. Um, as I end my presentation to you, I want to say to you there's much, much more. I haven't even begun to tap on the many stories that existed uh, in that period from 1800s to 1860s. There are many, many other stories. I mean, um, many. Jonathan J. Myers, who makes a decision to go to West Africa, to Nigeria. He believed in colonialization and wanted to create a colony. The Civil War is about to start, and the South is not going to be able to deliver to London, England, or England the necessary cotton that they need. And so they're wanting to create a colony over there and harvest cotton. And he goes to Nigeria, takes his son, and then eventually ends up England, where conferences to discuss it. Unfortunately, Nigeria is in a war, and so they need to they make a decision not to do it. But it's a dream that that Jonathan J. Myers actually engages on. Thank you, and thank you for participating. And we're here to answer any questions you have. Thank you.